All right, so whenever doing studio reviews, I'm always actually trying to find a good balance between reviewing completed code and then working through writing the code. And so what I'm going to try here today is I went through the code and I put a bunch of to-do statements throughout the code. And so hopefully that gives us the right pace. Also, maybe I'll do like a way for y'all to give me feedback on what type of pace you like for studio review. But we'll try this out for now. So let's see here. We're essentially adding on to the spot A controller, and they give us a new branch just as a nice clean starting place, which basically picks off from the end of the last time we were working on this. And so our validation should start with the model. So our first to-do item is going to be in the model. And so here, our job is to make sure that the username, password, and verify. We can ignore this. We don't need this. Username and password are required. They can't be empty. So I believe what they mean by that is not null. And then the password as well is at not null. Okay. The username must be between 5 and 15 characters. We'll add this. Size is what we use for strings. Min and max are what we use for numbers. So we will say min equals 5, max equals 15. The email is optional, but we still want it formatted correctly. So we will say at email. And finally, for the password, we will mark this as at least 6 characters long. So we'll say size, and we'll only include one option, which is min equals 6. Cool. That looks good. So from here, our next to-do item is going to be inside the controller. According to the studio, we want to modify the add method that displays the form so that it passes an empty user object with the syntax. The studio provides us the syntax here. So we have model, add attribute, new user. And so from here, we're missing one piece, and so we'll need to import model. So I'll tab, which adds it up here. I could alternatively, if it was in red text, I could hover it and press Alt Enter. That looks pretty good. So we're passing in a user object into our form. We're going to be using that user object. We're going to be validating off of it. We're going to be referencing it and stuff. So this block of code right here is now redundant because this block of code essentially is adding all of the different values to the form, and we're going to write some code later that makes this obsolete. So let's go ahead and delete this. And then finally, we're going to jump over to the add template to link up the fields to the model. So far, we've added the validation to the model. We've added this line of code here, which is going to add an empty user object to the form. And then we deleted the block of code that feeds data into the form because we don't need to do it that way anymore. So from here, we'll go to add HTML, add.html. All right, let's see here. So from here, we need to add the user/add template to make use of the model fields, right? So from here, we'll start at the top. We will say th field equals $sign username. Well, we'll need to say user.username, user.username. We don't need this anymore, so I'll just delete that. And this is not part of the studio, but I found when I was playing around with the bonus mission, it was helpful just for myself as a developer to see which field was throwing a validation error. And so I'm going to add a th errors equals $ curly brackets user dot username. So we'll add messages to that later. That's good. I'll copy this because I think well, I like copying code. From here, we'll go ahead and change this to email. We don't need this anymore because we're no longer force feeding that data into the form. I mean, even if we had it there, it's not going to do anything. And then here the field will be password. And this is not part of our model. We don't have verify password in a model. Sorry, to see. Question? Probably. Yep, that's a good call out. Get rid of that. Because we're not, yeah. You're right. Yeah. There we go. And so from here, we'll need this for now. We're going to hold on to that. Maybe we'll get rid of it later. But I'm going to go ahead and add a spot for validation errors for each of these. And I'll fix it in a second. Not that one. So from here, password. This one's email. There we go. Also, we can remove this right here. So this is just vanilla generic HTML validation. We can put the type on the input and it will validate it for us in the browser. We do not need this, and so we'll erase that. And this to-do item is done, but because I added these pieces right here, the errors, I want to, and that was kind of outside of the studio, I wanted to go ahead and modify our model to make use of those. So we'll just add a message to each of these. Equals, I'm going to be very generic, bad username. Email, message equals bad email. And then password equal message equals bad password. Okay. We're good there. Let's see. So jump over to the user controller for the last to-do item. Oops. Let me just close some stuff so it's easier for me not to accidentally click on it. All right. We need to add validation on form submission. So when we submit the form, it's going to reach this post mapping. So we need to add @valid here. And then we also, immediately after that, we need errors. If we don't have errors, that object in here, let me import it. If we don't have that object in here and we have validation errors, it's just going to crash the application, and we don't want that. So we need to catch these errors, and they will be contained in this value right here. So we added that. Now we need to check for validation errors. So we will say if errors dot has errors, then we're going to do something. If errors has errors returns true, return the user back to the form. And so what we'll do is we'll say return. It's going to look a little bit funny in the network tab because of how some of this is routed, but I'm going to say user/add semicolon. And then we'll come back to this one right here because because I want to really make sure that we test our changes before we refactor. We always want to test that things work before we try to make them better. All right, so let's go ahead and restart the code. Pull open the form. All right, so let's try a username that is at least 6 characters, or 5, I think was the minimum. An email that's validated correctly. And then a password. I'm going to try to do something that has at least 6 characters. I want this form to work. Chrome's very worried about my password. That's okay. All right, so it works in terms of like the object being passed around and stuff. But let me try with validation errors. So I'm going to do a username that is only 3 characters, an email that doesn't look right. We'll just say something that looks like an email. Say at instead of at gmail.com. Make it even look more like a real error. We'll do $sign. There we go. All right, and then from here we'll do a password that's there. Okay, the formatting broke, but I can see that I have a bad username and I have a bad email. The password didn't complain about that, and I did not get a message saying that my passwords didn't match. Let's try this again. See if I can get to that message, because we're about to get to the part where we have to refactor. Okay, so if everything else is validated correctly, but my passwords don't match, I get to this message. If things aren't validated correctly, it doesn't get to this message. And so that's a small problem. And we can look at our code and deduce why. So if there are validation errors, if there are any of them, it returns the form. And what happens when we return, it stops everything in that method or that function after the return statement. So nothing happens after the return. It's just like a cutoff point. So our else statement down here, there's just this whole block of code right here. It never reaches here. So now would be a good time to do this refactor step. So we want to refactor the password and the verify check to be part of the has errors check. So we could say something like, let me think real quick. Could we have validation errors and not that? Yeah, the if statement logic of this gets a little funky. So let's say if it has errors, or I have the not symbol here. It's probably a better way to do this. And then we'll say if I think this should work. It's not pretty at all. But what I am trying to do is I'm trying to write if it has errors, validation errors, or if the username and password don't match, well then I need to not accept this. If either of these checks fail, I can't accept it. Now, I could be sloppy and just say, throw a message out there that says the passwords don't match, but I don't want to be sloppy. I want to say if there are validation errors or if the passwords don't match, then I'll do another check that say if the passwords don't match, the not symbol, then I'm going to add the error message that say the passwords don't match. Then finally, I'm going to redirect or return back to the user form. So let's test this and see if the logic worked. Refresh, continue. Okay, this will be my username, a valid email, then passwords that don't match. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So that did what I wanted it to. It kept me on the page. It gave me the message that passwords don't match. Now let's try it where both are true, where we have passwords that don't match, but we also have a validation error. Yep, so I get my validation message right here. I still get my passwords do not match message. Then finally, a good test for this would be, does it work when we provide it good data? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it does. Okay. So this is in a pretty good working state right now. Yeah, this is good. So this would be a really great place to pause and go for questions. Any questions about the studio, what we just covered? No. Okay. So we are going to do an optional end. I will go ahead and review the bonus mission for everyone who is interested. However, I don't want to keep anyone here past when you need to be here, so feel free to go. It's been a good class. Thank you, and good night. Now, for those of you that choose to stay, we'll go ahead and do the bonus mission. So, sir.
Why don't you do them all? With an address in the post method.
Right, so this is how the code was when it was given. I'll show you here in just a moment. So the root is at user. So this is synonymous with if we were at user and we didn't have this. So I'll just remove that just to keep it a little bit more obvious. Okay, so we're at the user endpoint. And if we look at the add form under method, the action is targeting user. So if we start at user add and we post, it's going to send the post request not to user add, but just to user, because the action is set specifically in the HTML to go to user. And so because it goes there, our post mapping is routed to catch it there. And so I might like this better if it was at user / add. I think it would make it work a little bit better because you'll notice that the browser URL doesn't always look right when we redirect. Did that answer your question, or there's another part to the question? Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that if this was built specifically for what we're doing this studio, it probably wouldn't have been built that way, but because this is like a continuation of something else, they probably had it structured that way for the previous studio. Right, so let's go ahead and jump into the bonus mission. So the point of the bonus mission, as I remember, is essentially to move the verify password inside of our model instead of having it be a separate field. And then we'll actually even do the validation inside the model. So here we will say private string verify password, and then we would need to say it is not null. I think that's the only thing we'll need on there. I'll add a message. Message is passwords don't match. And so the logic that the bonus mission goes for is it basically says if the passwords don't match, it's going to force verify password to be null. It's just going to clear it. And so I can put this passwords don't match error message inside of not null, and it'll be right most of the time, unless they try to submit the form with no passwords at all. All right, let's see here. We need getters and setters, and then we need to add a new method. I'll just copy this for now. So let's generate getters and setters. Okay, we have our getters and setters. Now we have a method, check password. And so this checks to see if password and verify password, if they're not null. So we'll say if password, we could do this dot password. We'll say doesn't equal null. It's gonna be a lot of ands here. And verify password doesn't equal null. And password, yeah, I gotta put the not symbol in front of it, dot equals verify password. So this is a giant, ugly if statement with a lot going on. It's basically saying if they're not empty and they don't match, then we're going to do something. And what we're going to do is we're going to say verify password equals null. Now, when we are going to run this, you'll notice it's a private method. When we're going to run this is after password is set, we'll run it. And after verify password is set, we'll run it. And so what happens if password is set, has a value in it, but verify password isn't set, then verify password is null, and we're not going to do anything. If they are both set, if password set and verify password set, then neither of them are null. And so we're going to check, are they equal? If they're not equal, then we're going to force verify password to be null, and because it's set to be not null, it's going to throw a validation error. So that's kind of the logic of how they wanted us to do the bonus mission. Let's do the rest of this though, because we need to update. I don't think this will work on its own because we need to update the add form. So verify password isn't set yet. It's not linked to the model. We don't need the name anymore. Just pointed out earlier. And put this here. So we have a little way to debug things. And we also don't need this anymore. This custom error for when the passwords don't match. If we look at our controller, we don't need all of this logic. All of this does have validation errors, and do they not match? We can keep it simple. I'll actually simplify this even further and get rid of the else statement because that's totally unnecessary. All right, what do we have here? This could work. Let's try it. A lot of steps that we didn't test. Fingers crossed. Let me see, did I? Oh, I need to remove this. This is no good. That was when I was trying to explain something. Oh, hold on. Give me 1 second here. Yeah. Had some changes. Starter code. Rerun. All right. So let's test this. What we really want to test and see if it works is if we have valid data but invalid or non-matching passwords. So I'll just go. All right, so this should not let me proceed. Passwords don't match. That's actually, I'm relieved. Then we'll see if we're able to get through. Otherwise, yes. Yay, that's success. So that is a summary of the bonus mission. Any questions, thoughts? Thanks for sticking around, by the way.